Welcome everyone. You have joined a webinar hosted by Australian Teacher Aide, the leader in professional learning and the only national network especially for teacher aides. My name is Mandy Bell and I have here with me fellow ATA Director Stella Liliendahl and also our special guest and presenter today, Catherine Tongs. We are thrilled to have so many people join us for this webinar this afternoon. We have got some Australian Teacher Aide members on this webinar today. A very warm welcome to you. And we also have lots of people who are new to Australian Teacher Aide, people from all over Australia, the Northern Territory, Tasmania, Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, etc. So for those of you who aren't so familiar with Australian Teacher Aide, we have a lot to offer on our website, but we also offer a premium service for members. We cater to individual teacher aides, schools and corporate organisations, including registered training organisations. And at Australian Teacher Aide, we truly value the role of education support staff in schools. This important role is quite often unintentionally overlooked in school communities. And right now, with school budgets tightening, there's a big opportunity for schools to consider how teachers and teacher aides can work together more effectively in the classroom. We know that the key role of the teacher aide is to support students in learning, but just like teachers, teacher aides also need to stay current and up to date with teaching and learning support practices. So, we created Australian Teacher Aide to help make a difference, to help bridge the gap between the education support role and student learning and outcomes. Australian Teacher Aide supports teacher aides by providing customised professional learning that's relevant to their role and access to their own online community network. We work with schools to provide solutions that enable education staff to work effectively together for the benefit of students, and we save schools time and money by managing the PD needs of the entire teacher aide team. We also support training organisations with access to industry current resources and national networking opportunities. After this webinar, I encourage you to check us out on the website. As you can see on the screen there, our address is www.australianteacheraide.com.au. We have so much more for you there. For a fraction of the cost of a PD event, you can access 1 year's worth of ongoing professional learning and networking. We also have a special corporate price for schools and other organisations joining 5 or more staff, so simply incredible value. But right now, you are in for a treat. This webinar is awesome. You're going to learn from Catherine some really practical strategies to take away with you that will help you in the classroom and at home every day. And I'm sure you'll agree that with the scope of work that most of you are dealing with, you can use every tip you can get your hands on when it comes to supporting behaviour. I'm now going to hand over to Stella Liliendahl, who will introduce our special guest, Catherine Tongs.
I am delighted to introduce to you my very dear friend and colleague, Catherine Tongs. Catherine is a parenting and personal empowerment coach. She is also an Australian national instructor with the Effectiveness Training Institute of Australia and has over 35 years' experience in both education and training. Catherine started her career as a preschool and primary teacher, and later she lectured in early childhood at TAFE. Catherine has helped countless parents and educators improve their communication skills both in Australia and overseas. Catherine lived in China for the past 7 years and only recently returned, and we're privileged to have her here today. And on behalf of everyone, a very warm welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Stella. I'm delighted to be here, and welcome to all the teacher aides, parents and other people who are listening in. This webinar is for you if you want to do the following things. I imagine you've got this on your screen, but I know that often as teacher aides you're dealing with escalated emotions of children. So I'm sure you'd like to know more about how to de-escalate. Helping children solve their own problems and bring out the best in the children that you work with, as well as to parent more effectively. So let's move on. I'll tell you a little more about myself, and the main thing that I will show you at the moment is that change is possible. This is the main point on my website, The Parent Within. So a little bit more about me. As Stella said, I've been living in China and had a most wonderful experience there, and co-authored a book for children that's available on Amazon. It was really a labour of love with the people you can see on that screen. They were fellow expatriate parents, and there were 5 others and their children, and we wrote a collection of true stories of the experience of children coping with their transitions of living in a different culture. So that all came about because I was teaching parent effectiveness training, a course that I continue to teach today and have been teaching for the last 38 years, in fact. And it was through teaching that course that the parents, we came together and felt that we needed to offer more support for children in these challenging situations of moving between cultures. So I'll tell you a little bit about parent effectiveness training, because these skills will underpin the talk I'm going to give today, and I know that you're going to find them very helpful in the classroom and at home. PET was written by Dr. Thomas Gordon, who was a psychologist. He was nominated 3 times for a Nobel Peace Prize, and he not only formulated this effective method of communication for parents, he also formulated an approach called teacher effectiveness training, and a number of other books. The interesting thing is that current neuroscience actually validates the method that he devised almost 50 years ago. Let's begin, because I know you want to get to the nitty-gritty. So, how to help children solve their own problems. I'm going to focus on 4 particular aspects of this in this session. And number 1 is that behaviour is driven by needs. Number 2, how to avoid roadblocks in communication when children actually have problems. How can you avoid those blocks that stop them from talking or don't help them with their emotions? Number 3 is how you can actively listen to children so that they can solve their own problems. And number 4 is how to encourage them to do the problem solving that will be beneficial for them. So let's move on. Behaviour is driven by needs. Now, I'm sure you're very aware when a child has a problem. And the question there is asking you, well, how do you know? And I'm sure through your excellent methods of observation as a teacher aide, as all teacher aides have, you notice these changes in children. They might be crying, they might be just looking forlorn, they might be punching another child or doing any number of things that show a change in their demeanour, or they actually tell you that they've got a problem. So that's fairly straightforward, that you often do know. Sometimes it's a little more difficult. But what we'll focus on initially is looking at yourself, because if you're like most people, and I know for me, when a child is very upset or has an emotional outburst, it can trigger in you a reaction. And then that can affect how you actually interact with them. And instead of bringing out the best in them, you don't necessarily bring out the best in yourself either. So have a little think about, what happens for you when a child has a problem, when they have an emotional upset? Just be thinking about that. So if your hot buttons are triggered sometimes, then what to do? Well, what I'd like to say to you first is that your emotions actually follow your thoughts. So if you feel anger, or if you feel confused, or if you feel very upset, it's often because of a thought, which could be, oh, that child is so annoying. And you won't be the first teacher aide to have thought that, I'm sure. Or you might be thinking, oh, not again. Or I wish I knew what to do. So all these thoughts might be going on in your head, which leads to your emotional reactivity. And it often then triggers in you a defensive response, which you've probably heard about, the fight or flight response. And that might be that you decide to try to control the situation by fighting, or you retreat and try to get somebody else to deal with it, or you move away from the situation without actually being a helper to the child. So we'll look at how you can deal with these upsets in yourself. One of the ways is to look at the way you think of behavior. And I hope if there's one important message that you take away today, is that children behave to get their needs met. They're always behaving to get their needs met. So think about this. Do you think of the child as misbehaving when the child might have a problem? And if you do, then you're thinking in a judgmental way. And my proposition is that you try to think differently. If you think that children are acting to get their needs met, then you're more solution focused, and you'll find different ways to help them, but also you will feel more in control of the situation yourself. You'll feel that you have a method to use. Well, you won't even feel it, you'll know it. And I'll show you what that is. Let's just be clear on the difference between behavior and judgment. To understand children's needs, it's very important that we focus on behavior. So if you look at your chat box, if you could just put in whether these following statements are a behavior or a judgment. So just put a B if you think it's a behavior and a J if you think it's a judgment. And so the first one, tell me, is this a behavior or a judgment? The child is rude. And then Stella might be able to tell me what people are saying.
We've got about 50-50, Catherine. One, two, a little bit more in favour of behaviour, but some people are saying judgmental.
Okay, so the first one, if we look at it, the child is rude. It's actually a judgment about a behaviour. So an interesting way to think of behaviour is, a behaviour is anything a child says or does. You can't see rudeness. It's our judgment of the behaviour. What you might see, if it was a behaviour, you would see something like, child interrupts while the teacher is speaking, or the child keeps calling out in class. You can see that and you can hear it. That's the description of behaviour. Whereas saying the child is rude becomes a judgment. And that's what interferes with us being an effective helper of children when they have a problem. So let's do another one. Child is crying. Is that a behaviour or a judgment? And while you're answering that, putting it in the chat box, either a B or a J, can you see them crying? Can you hear them crying? And then you'll get the answer. So Stella?
Okay, Catherine, so this time everyone has pretty clearly put B for behaviour because they feel that they can see that the child is crying.
Yes. Now, likewise, the child screams, you can hear that. So that would be a behaviour. Now, child is good. I'll get you to answer that one. And if the listeners could put in either a B or a J. Child is good. Can you see the child being good? Can you hear? It could be either or, seeing or hearing. Otherwise, it's your judgment about the child. And then Stella, you can tell me.
All right, Catherine. There's a bit of a mixed response here, Catherine. Again, some Bs and some Js, so you may want to talk about that one a little bit.
Thank you. You know, we say so often that, oh, you're a good girl, you're a good boy. In actual fact, it is our evaluation, our judgment. If we look at child is good, can we see the child good? We can see what they are doing. So what would be a behavior that would help us see what the child's doing? Maybe the child is sitting on the carpet as requested by the teacher. The child is reading a book. That would be the description of behavior. Whereas saying the child is good becomes a judgment. So it also implies that if we say the child is good, then the child can also be bad. So that's a judgment again. So if in this session you keep your mind on the fact of the child's behavior is something you can see or hear. The one that says child does not eat lunch is a behavior. You can see that they're not eating their lunch. If you say the child is a daydreamer, again, that's a judgment. What is the child doing? The child might be looking out the window and not listening to the teacher or not doing their homework. That child is a daydreamer is a judgment. Okay, so we'll keep moving on and just keep focused on behavior. And I'll explain a little more how judgment can get in the way. So if you look at behavior is driven by needs, behavior is anything a child says or does, think behavior, not judgment, and children are always behaving to get their needs met. And if you look at that cute picture there, that was a little local Chinese school that I visited one day, and that little boy at the front in the red little jersey, I just think he's the cutest because he was really enjoying me watching him performing, and the others probably not so much, but he was really enjoying the focus of everyone watching. So I still giggle when I look at that. So the next question is, how do you discover a child's need in the midst of their upset? And we'll look at how to avoid roadblocks. And after this then, I'll leave some time for questions. All right, Stella and I are going to have some fun, and we're going to do a little role play. So if you could all pretend that you're doing Stella's role as well. You obviously won't be actually vocalizing, but Stella will. And you are all going to be a collective 11-year-old child. And this 11-year-old is in the library, and let's say you're the teacher aide in the library, and the 11-year-old doesn't go out in the playground in the lunch hour like all the other children. She stays inside the library, and apparently everyone else is playing handball. That seems to be the in-game at the moment, and she doesn't want to because she thinks she's not good enough. Now I'm going to be a teacher aide, and I'm going to use roadblocks here that don't help this child to get their needs met. They don't help this child to work out whatever the problem might be. So I want you to feel what it's like to have these roadblocks used, and then we're going to learn a skill that will be the most wonderful skill in terms of your relationships with children, no matter what age. So get the sense of it as Stella and I do the role play. So Stella
Yes,
has just
Catherine.
said, yeah, you have just said to me, I've been staying in the classroom during the lunch break instead of going out on the stupid playground to play handball. I'm no good at handball. So that's what Stella will have just said to me. And now I'm going to use every one of these roadblocks. Obviously, it would be an overkill for anyone to say all these things. And I want Stella to respond just how a child might, so you get the feeling of it. Stella, I don't want you to stay in the library. Tomorrow, just go outside and play handball with the other children. You're staying in here too much.
I don't want to play handball.
Stella, if you don't get out there and play handball, you'll never learn. You'll regret it the rest of your life, not playing
No,
a
I
sport.
won't. No, I won't.
Sorry, I had a giggle then. I wouldn't as the teacher aide, I know. Well, Stella, you really shouldn't act that way. All children ought to learn a sport.
That's not fair.
Look, why don't you just practice more at home, Stella, and then you won't need to stay inside in the library.
You're so horrible.
Oh, Stella, staying inside at lunchtime's no way to learn. The only way you'll ever learn is just go out and do it.
I like being inside.
I think you're just lazy. Go out there during the lunch break. Go on.
I'm going to tell Mrs. Jones on you.
Oh, Stella, you're always a good kid. I'm sure you know what you're doing.
Mm.
Look, Stella, you're just being a spoilt brat about this. If you can't be the star, then you're just a quitter.
Oh, that's horrible. That's not fair. I don't like you.
Stella, it's my opinion you're doing this to get more of the teacher's attention. Maybe you're not getting enough sleep. You're just tired.
I'm not. I get lots of sleep.
Oh, don't worry about it. It's probably just a phase you're going through. A couple of weeks, you'll be over all this.
Won't.
Now, Stella, does your mother know about this? And how do you feel when the lunch bell rings? What do your friends say?
They ask me why I don't come and play.
Huh. Well, let's just forget about it right now. We'll talk about it later. Right now, tell me about all the good things you're doing at school.
No, I don't want to. I'm going now.
I'm sitting here thinking of all the things that I would feel like saying back to her at the moment. But what I want to hear from the listeners is, how did you feel if you were Stella? How would you be feeling? And could you write that in your chat box, please? And while you're doing that, I'll ask Stella, how did you feel?
Okay, well, I had lots of mixed feelings there, Catherine, because I felt like you were coming at me from every angle, but I felt annoyed and fed up. I thought that you were just saying lots of things that were meaningless. You didn't listen to what I had to say at all. So, no, I wasn't very happy with what you had to say. Would you like me to read some of the responses we've got in our chat box?
That would be terrific. Thank you.
Okay, so things such as I feel sad, not understood or listened to, intimidated, frustrated, angry, overwhelmed, that you weren't listening to me, that I was being misunderstood. It made me feel anxious and unhappy, and someone said I couldn't imagine an aide saying these things. Upset, alone and sad.
I really hope no one would. But do you know that sometimes we might not be as extreme as that, and we certainly wouldn't use all of those at once. But there could be things like reassuring, never mind, it will work out. Giving advice, telling the child that, why don't you practice more? So some of those are a little more subtle, even praising, you're such a good girl. Uh, those things, when a child has a problem, don't help the child to move forward. They don't help the child to work through their problem. And sometimes when there's a lot of emotion, children can have what's called emotional flooding. And it's very, very hard for them to think clearly about how they can resolve their problem and move forward. So I'm going to show you a way that moves beyond using roadblocks and those more subtle forms of roadblocks or even the extreme forms of roadblocks. Oh, I forgot. I wanted to add some of these others that you may or may not have been thinking of. Resistance, resentment, dependency, inadequacy, and you've certainly mentioned them. But I also wanted to tell you about this wonderful quote by Haim Guinot. When someone is drowning, it is not the time to teach them to swim. And yet often we become very moralistic and try to teach lessons to children at the very time they're feeling anxious and having difficulty with a problem. So here's what to do. Actively listen. This is the wonderful skill that was devised by Thomas Gordon in parent effectiveness training. There are many other names given to active listening today. It could be feedback, reflective listening. But basically, it is a wonderful skill when a child has an unmet need, and we can help them to clear those emotions and find out what really is their need. So a great equation is just to think of active listening equals feelings and facts. And it's going to assist the child to discharge their feelings and work out their own solution, as well as develop a warm relationship compared to that previous teacher aide that was me. So I'm going to give, I'll go through this one and then we'll go back to Stella's example before of active listening and what to do. So let's pretend this child here in the picture says, I wish I could get a cold once in a while like Katie. She's lucky. Let's think, what is the feeling that this little girl is feeling about Katie? So just put in your chat box, what do you think she's feeling? And then Stella will feed back to me what you think.
Okay, Catherine, I'll read some responses as they come in. People are saying envious, that Katie is lucky,
Yeah.
that they would like some attention too.
Terrific. There's some great examples. So the important thing when you really listen to children is put your feet in their shoes and feedback what you think it is that they're feeling. So in this case, as someone said, you might use an active listening response like, you're feeling envious about Katie. So that's the fact about Katie. You feel you're missing out on something that Katie has when she gets a cold. So have a look at the next slide and we'll look at what could just help you hit the bullseye with active listening. Be careful not to exaggerate. For example, if you're listening, oh, you're really angry about Katie, that's exaggerating. Or you're a little bit upset. Sometimes we say things like that. Or we parrot back what they're saying. Or we ask a question like, now, why are you feeling that way? Because the natural reaction when a child says something like, I wish I could get a cold like Katie, is that we want to say, oh, don't be ridiculous, which is like a roadblock. So that doesn't help the child, and the presenting problem is not always the problem. Keep going. Which choice would you make here? Put in your chat box. Would you choose A, B, or C? You feel you're sort of left out. Oh, don't wish you were sick. You're jealous of Katie. Or someone said before, you're envious of Katie. I
All
guess
right,
I
Catherine.
gave an answer. Stella?
All the responses are A.
Okay. It can be A. It could also be C. You're envious of Katie. You're jealous of Katie, which adds that extra point. Let's go on to the next one. Yes, she gets to stay out of school and I never do. So what is she feeling? What is this girl feeling? She gets to stay out of school and I never do. It could be one of the following. So you may have been thinking about it. So which would you choose? You wish you could stay out of school more too. You should want to be in school. You never get anything you want. So you could put in the chat box A, B, or C. Again, trying to hit the bullseye of if you put your feet in her shoes, what is she feeling?
Okay, Catherine, some A's and C's coming in there.
My preference would be A, you wish you could stay out of school more too. The C is a little exaggerated, you never get anything you want. So the preference would be for A, to be hitting the bullseye. Here's the next one. Yes, I do. I don't like to go to school every day, day after day. I get sick of it. So think about, what is she feeling? What is she really feeling? And then make a choice here. Is it A, B, or C in your chat box? But you know you should. You'll get behind if you start missing school. You really get tired of school sometimes.
Okay, Catherine, so this time lots of C's are coming in.
Okay, C would be the bullseye, hitting the bullseye with really listening, because that's what she's feeling. She doesn't want to go to school every day. You're listening to what she's saying in the here and now, and she's saying, I get tired of school sometimes. So this conversation went on for quite a while, in this interaction, and then we get to, so there's a lot of active listening that happens, and eventually what comes out is, I don't honestly know how girls get into this group. They're not the prettiest, not all of them. They're not always the ones with the best grades. Some in the group get high grades, but most of them get lower grades than I get. I just don't know. So an active listening response, if you try to understand her feeling, could be, you're feeling confused about what it takes to get into this group. That could be the response. I'm going to just move on to the next one so we have time to get to problem solving. Well, one thing is that the girls in this group are all pretty friendly. They talk a lot and, make friends. They say hello to you first and talk easily. I can't do that. I'm just not good at that stuff. So if we think, what is she feeling here now? It's different to wanting a cold. It's actually saying that she doesn't know how to make friends in a group. So at this point, when the emotions have started to subside, there's an emotional catharsis and she's able to identify what her need is, then that's where you can help her move on to problem solving, how she can get this need met, to find out about group interactions. It could be about a range of things. While someone might be writing a question, I'll answer the question about the most common question, which is about, how do I have time for this when I'm a busy teacher aide? And my answer to that is that in actual fact you save time, because many times it might only take 1 or 2 active listening responses for the child to calm, for the child to gain some clarity, and then they're able to make a decision. So it really is worth it. Stella, is there a question?
Catherine, the question was very similar to what you've just answered, so we might move on.
Okay, great. So far we've looked at behaviours driven by needs, how to avoid those roadblocks that stop communication, how to really listen. So if you encourage the child to now problem solve to get their need met, it might be they're having trouble making a decision, you'll actually accelerate their growth from dependence on you to independence, and you help develop a growth mindset. Here's the formula that parent effectiveness training uses to facilitate the problem solving, and we'll go with, I don't know which science project to choose. So this could be something happens every day where a child isn't sure what to do. Firstly, you have to define needs, and the way you do that is to actively listen to the child. So you might say something like, you're really unsure about what to choose. It's a really difficult decision for you. Something like that. Yeah, I just don't know which one. Then you move them on to brainstorming solutions. So, have you had this problem before and made a decision? You might ask a question. Have you got some ideas for how you could make this decision? Is there someone you could speak with who would help you make this decision? A friend. So you're just encouraging them to come up with a solution. The child might say, well, I know I'll get better marks if I do this one, but I really love the other one. And then you might ask the question again, so which would you prefer? And then they can think through whether they'll go with the first or the second. They'll evaluate their solutions, choose them, put it into practice, and then you can say to them, how do you feel about the decision you make? So you're reinforcing that decision with them. I mentioned before about growth mindset. And what happens when you encourage children to problem solve? They develop a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. If you always provide the answers for them, I think you should do this one rather than that one, or this is what you need to do, you may be encouraging a fixed mindset. So this little poster from teachstarter.com actually answers that question, and it's a great one to put up on the wall for children to help them to see the benefits of trying, of problem solving as well. So let's go over this again. Behaviour is driven by the needs of children. They're always behaving to get a need met. Try to avoid the roadblocks when children have an emotional upset. Remember, when a child is drowning is not the time to teach them to swim. Wait until the emotion has subsided. Then you can do your teaching or advising. Actively listen to the child. That will help reduce the emotional upset. That will help the child to make decisions for themselves. And then you can help them with a guided problem solving to move them beyond where they're at. So a simple example in an early childhood class, the child says, I don't know what to play. And you might hold them by the hand and walk them around and say, let's have a look around the room and see what you can choose, rather than telling them if they have the opportunity to make a choice. So that's the 4 major points, and the time has come to an end so quickly that there's so much more to learn about active listening and problem solving. When I run courses in this, in parent effectiveness training, we actually spend quite a number of hours in the training of the active listening and also in encouraging the problem solving. It would have to be the best skill, active listening, that you could try to apply. I'd encourage you to buy the Parent Effectiveness Training book or the Teacher Effectiveness Training book. And I wanted to mention about Bill Gates Sr. was interviewed in Fortune magazine a few years back, and he was asked about the best advice he'd been given, and he said, my wife and I did a PET, Parent Effectiveness Training course, when they were young parents. These are some of the testimonials from the parents who've been in my courses, and I know that when one chooses to think differently about behaviour, the most amazing things start to happen. And I'm sure that that will happen for you as a teacher aide when you employ some of those strategies of thinking differently about behaviour and also applying the active listening skill. It's time for questions, and I'm really open to your questions, feedback, comments.
Okay, Catherine, I have two questions here. One question is, can you please name that website again that the Mindset poster is on?
Yes, sure. I'll go back to it so you can see it. And it's teachstarter.com. Yeah, they're professional resources for primary school teachers and parents. Online, you can access them.
Okay, the next question, Catherine, is what do you suggest to do when the child does not want to talk?
That's a great question. And yes, it's great if a child does talk. We cannot ever force a child to talk, but the more we show empathy and try to put our feet in their shoes, hopefully they will begin to respond, and we can have a more trusting relationship. So if we say to the child, and I don't know the age of the child, but let's say it's a primary school age child and they're not wanting to talk, and you can see they do have some sort of an upset or a problem, the best thing to say is, I can see that you seem upset about something. And maybe they'll say to you, I don't want to talk, or maybe they'll turn their back. So then you would active listen that, and you'd say, seems like you're not wanting to talk just yet, but I'm here for you when you're ready to talk, and I can sit here next to you if you'd like me to, or if you would like to talk to me later. We cannot ever force a child. We just need to use what's called a door opener and open up the opportunity for them to come to you later. Because I know for myself, sometimes if I'm really upset, I don't necessarily want to talk at that moment. I need space, and a child may need that too.
Thanks, Catherine. There are a couple of more questions. What about this? This says, I have gained so much more information from this. So, if a student has a fixed mindset, what would be the best strategies to change this? And I'm not sure if there's another part to this question, so I'll just stop there for a minute.
Okay, so in terms of a fixed mindset, there was the researcher, Dr. Carol Dweck. She's from Stanford University, a professor there, and she discovered growth mindset, fixed mindset of children. And what she discovered was that the way adults speak around children affects whether a child has a growth or a fixed mindset. And if adults speak in ways such as that help a child to think that their intelligence is fixed and they're, they can't change the way they are, then that increases after year 3. So it's very important that adults watch what they say. And using skills like active listening helps a child to express their emotions. Using skills like problem solving with a child, helping them to realize they can solve their problems, helps them to realize they can challenge themselves and that they don't need to have a fixed mindset. They're probably the key features of the difference with a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, and helping a child not to have a fixed mindset. Of course, the way you speak to children when you have a problem with their behavior, if you use judgmental language like I did with Stella, you're lazy, say things like that, those judgmental terms, even using praise, is negative. Praise does not help children to develop a growth mindset because praise encourages dependency rather than the very thing you want, which is independence. It means that they'll only do things to get praise as opposed to doing things because they're motivated from within. And that can be problematic if praise is used a lot. So use encouraging statements about their capacities and their the process of what they're doing. For example, it could be something like that
Catherine, I was going to give you two examples. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
This person did add a little bit more to her sentence and said, in the classroom, the student has difficulty with things like listening and doing tasks. So maybe you could give an encouraging example around those.
Okay, so if the child has trouble with listening and doing tasks, okay, so in each of those cases, the way I would help that child to develop a growth mindset would be having a talk with the child and letting them tell me about their challenges in those areas, because they must know about them, that it's hard for them sticking to tasks and it's hard for them listening. And so by talking about them helps them to become more self-aware. So that's a really positive thing for a start. And then you can help them with problem solving, what they think that they could do to stick to tasks. Now, it could be that they are going to need extra help from you in giving suggestions as well. But if you hear things coming from them, well, I'm no good, I can't do it, then you can talk to them about change can happen, that it's possible, that our brain is not fixed. We can develop our brain. So talking about the brain and coaching children about the brain is really important. There's a great book called The Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel, S-I-E-G-E-L, and he gives illustrations about the brain and shows in simple ways how to talk to children about the brain. But as a teacher aide, that's what you could talk to this child about, that it might take them a little while to create new pathways in the brain, but if they persevere, even when they're frustrated, that little by little they can make changes.
Thanks, Catherine. I just wanted to give you some feedback as well. Lynn writes, our school is using the growth mindset. We actually have a lesson once a week for the students, and teachers and teacher aides use it every day.
Wow. That's fantastic. Really fantastic. Yeah. So what I'd like to say to that person who wrote that in, the effective communication skills, the PET, really helps support a growth mindset, because they really do bring out the best in the child. So it's not just what you say to the child, it's how you interact with the child on a daily basis, daily routines. So you might have a lesson on growth mindset or talk to the children at one point in the day, but it's all those little interactions on a daily basis of really listening to children, of helping them to problem solve for themselves, and that's what can make a huge difference.
Thanks, Catherine. There was a bit more feedback that you might want to comment on. Dara writes that I find with our junior secondary students that a calm voice, total eye contact, and non-judgmental feedback also makes the world of difference. We get a lot of exaggerated problems with this age student.
Absolutely. It's not only the words you're saying, but also your body language. So definitely what you're saying, I wholeheartedly agree. The tone of your voice, the calmness, and it's very important to be in touch with your emotions, because if you feel prickly, the child will feel it as well. You feel irritated by them having a problem, that certainly negatively affects. And what I was just going to add before is the importance of acknowledging children's efforts and strategies, as opposed to praise about abilities and correct answers. The process that's important. That's what creates a growth mindset. So instead of great job, good boy, how smart, gifted or talented they are, you might say something, I love to see you enjoy reading. It's such a great way to learn so much about life. Or looks like it took a lot of perseverance for you to complete that project on time. You seem really pleased with yourself.
So Catherine, I just want to let you know now we have just a few short minutes left before this webinar session ends, in case you have some last words of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with.
I would just like to say that teacher aides do a remarkable job, and if anything has triggered a feeling of guilt, oh, I wish I hadn't been saying this in a certain way, I wish I'd been doing things differently, focus your energy on moving forward. And I congratulate you for coming and joining this webinar, because that in itself says so much about you, the openness to learning, and you're a great example for a growth mindset to a child, the fact you've attended. So thank you, Stella, and also thank you, Mandy, and the Australian Teacher Aide, because I think it's a wonderful organisation to support teacher aides. If anyone wants to find out more, please go to my website, and I run parenting courses in Brisbane and on the Sunshine Coast, but no matter where you are in Australia, I can put you in touch with someone who might be near you. So you're welcome to contact me and I can help out there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This is Australian Teacher Aide with special guest Catherine Tongs.